Morning! So the download of today is taken from Judges chapter 6, and it's the story of Gideon. And when we meet Gideon, the backstory is that, again, the children of Israel had done evil in God's eyes. They'd been delivered into the hand of the Midianites for 7 years. At the time we meet him, they'd been so oppressed that there was no sustenance left for Israel. It says that in verse 6 that Israel was greatly impoverished because of the oppression from the Midianites. And classic, they were oppressed, they cried out, they were in that sort of vicious cycle. And where we meet Gideon, he's actually next to a wine press, and he says he's threshing, so he's harvesting wheat there because he's hiding it from the Midianites. So any food, any sustenance he can get, he's there hiding away. And that's where we meet him. That's where the angel of the Lord meets him, appears to him and says, "You're a mighty man of valor." There's something is not adding up, because you can imagine a mighty man of valor wouldn't be hiding next to a wine press, too afraid to harvest food in public. And then there's a sign, and then Gideon sees that actually, it's an angel of the Lord I've seen face to face. Then you go down to verse 27, and then the angel of the Lord has asked him to cut down the altar of Baal that his father had built. And it says that Gideon is so scared of doing this that because he fears his father's house, and because he fears the men in the city and the reaction that he'll get from doing it, that he did it at night. That ain't a mighty man of valor. A mighty man of valor isn't trying to hide out at night. Like a mighty man of valor, I would imagine, would be like, cool, this is the brief, let me go and do it. I don't care what anyone else thinks or says, like, I'll deal with fear afterwards. So again, we're thinking, okay, mighty man of valor, that's an interesting title for someone who's hiding by a wine press, who's too afraid to cut down the altar of Baal to stand up for what he believes in public. And then you do all that, there's a backlash, the men are going to kill him. And then it says in verse 34, then the Spirit of the Lord came upon Gideon. And that is like the turning point, that's the transformation. And then you see for the rest of the chapter 6 and chapter 7 how Gideon starts moving differently. And yes, he does ask God for a sign, 2 signs with the fleece and the water and the dew, if the dew's on the land or if the dew's on the fleece. But once the Spirit is on him, once he's got his sign, he's got his confirmation, he's straight there doing what God has asked him to do. And obviously, the story ends in the defeat for the Midianites. And it's just a powerful reminder that when the Spirit of God is, like we're filled with the Spirit of God in us, empowers us to do what God has called us to do. So we don't need to worry about anything, we don't need to fear. We can be bold, because what we can do when the Spirit is on us is supercharged. And also the other reminder is that God can use anything and anyone, and no matter what identity we've put on ourselves, we need to reject what we think of ourselves and what the world has put on us, and actually we need to tap into what God has told us, who God has said we are. We are who God says we are. So if God says you're a mighty man of valor, then you're a mighty man of valor. You don't need to be hiding out, you don't need to be afraid, because you are what God has said you are, not what you think you are, not what other people have said you are. And when the Spirit of God is on you, you can do exploits. So that is the download of the day. I hope you have a good day and see you tomorrow.